All right, Matt, we're live. It's Thursday night. It's another episode of InfoSec to Insanity. I don't know what episode this is, 27, 26? Help me out. 27. All right, so tonight we talk about accountability. We actually almost kind of planned this one because we talked about that in the last episode towards the end. Like, we're going to do the next one on accountability. Do you remember what we said the next one was going to be after that?
I don't. It's almost like we kind of sort of know what we're doing.
No, we don't. No. Well, prior to this episode, so I wrote a blog post about this accountability called The Accountability Vacuum. And that's also chapter 2 of Unsecurity 2, right? The update to Unsecurity, which was more popular than I expected it to be. But so I sent you a draft of chapter 2.
I have some
Did you get a chance to look at it?
Yep, I read it. I have some thoughts for you we can chat about.
Yeah. So I opened that chapter up with a quote. The quote is from my father.
I like that.
He was a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps. You're a Marine, so it probably sounds familiar. He always just told me that shitty choices always come with consequences. And sometimes he would say that and remind me. Sometimes I just got the consequence first, and then he would tell me. Like, what the hell was that for? Well, that was your shitty choice. Okay, damn.
It's like you said a couple of times, right? It should be done before it needs to be said.
Yeah, that was his rule too. Yeah. If I have to tell you to do something, it's too late. Yep. So that would constitute a shitty consequence or a shitty choice in his mind. If there was something that I was supposed to have done that I didn't do, and I may not have realized that I was supposed to do it. And so I would suffer the consequence and then be like, what was that? And then it was like, oh, that was the shitty choice. I get it.
So I didn't have a quote like that I remember from the Marine Corps, but one of my platoon sergeants, his quote always was professionalism and accountability. You do what's right because it's right, and you're accountable to and for everybody.
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, that's nothing. I don't think there's few things that piss me off more than lack of accountability. Somebody who's in a position where it's clear that they are the ones who are supposed to be accountable for something, then they don't do it. It didn't get called out. Something bad happens. So there's the consequence. In this case, maybe it's a breach. And then it's all this finger pointing. Then it's like, I wasn't accountable. And it's all this bullshit. And in our industry, in the information security industry, accountability is severely lacking. It's always been lacking. There's countless examples, and you'll see that as you read, that chapter. I think I outlined, 3 in particular.
I think
and we can talk about those tonight.
I think you had 6 total.
I wrote about the Equifax breach, the Uber cover-up in 2016, which some people may forget about. That one was so fraudulent. It was crazy. And then the Change Healthcare ransomware attack last year. Those are all things that we can talk about tonight. We can talk about accountability. What's your position? Do you feel like there's accountability in the information security industry?
I do not. So I agree with a lot of the stuff that you have outlined that we'll talk about. I think we do need a change, and I wanted to chat about that too after. Like, it's crazy. Like, when I read the way you write about things, like, it inspires me to like think about stuff. It gets me like motivated, but then it's like, what do I do next?
Right. Yeah, and as I've been writing on security too, one of the things I was questioning going into this was, has it gotten any better? Since I wrote on security in 19, here we are, 5-6 years later. You would hope that we've made progress, especially when your life's mission is to fix the broken industry. You're like, did we fix anything? And sadly, shit's worse. So as I'm writing this, I'm like, man, I just sound like, it kind of gets depressing, and you kind of feel like you're just writing negative. But, it's certainly the negative far outweighs the positive. And I think it would, as I'm writing this, I'm finishing each chapter with a call to action, because I also don't believe that you just sit there and call things out, sit there and complain without bringing something to the table. Give me some. I would demand the same thing from people, my direct reports. Like, don't come to me and just complain. Don't come to me and just tell me problems. Come to me with, some proposed solutions, at least ideas that we can start to discuss, because that's what you're held accountable to, right? We solve problems. We don't just call them out. We don't just,
Find
complain.
them. Yeah.
So it's, but yeah, as you're writing, like, man, this is another angle. Because even as I read, the current draft that I sent you, I could add more to it. I'm already at, in two chapters. There are 10 chapters in this book.
8.
Through two chapters. Yeah, through two chapters, I'm at 24,880 words. It's like, okay, we're going to have to slim that down a little bit and try to make it a little more entertaining, maybe add a little more personal history or personal stories to, kind of some of the things you're writing. But in terms of the accountability, I can tell you, the first time it really kind of hit me between the eyes was when I worked on the Target breach in 2013. Because, after that breach, so I'd already had I guess when I read about what took place, or heard about what took place, I'd written an article on my blog about negligence. At what point do you determine that something's negligent or not? And you go back to that prudent man rule, and I'm not a lawyer, but, I know that, there's hardly anything done from a criminal standpoint for a business leader if there's a breach. So really the only recourse that you see anything really happen is with civil suits. And, that's just preponderance of evidence. If it's like scale, right? It's like a scale. If the scale tips more your way, then you end up winning that case. And so, I'd written this thing about negligence, and then I guess one of the lawyers that was in the special litigation committee. So Target, one of the after the breach happened, there's always a bunch of lawsuits. And one of those lawsuits was called a derivative action. That's where Target filed suit against Target, essentially. It's the shareholders filed suit against the board of directors. And so when that happens, being that Target is suing Target, essentially, the court appoints an independent body called the Special Litigation Committee to investigate the charges, brought by the shareholders, and then make a recommendation back to the court on whether we should do anything about this. And so the lawyers that were appointed on the Special Litigation Committee, one of them had, I guess, come across one of the blog posts that I had written about it and wanted to interview me to be on the Special Litigation Committee. So I went in there and, the first thing
You're
he says to me
the
is,
acting expert now.
well, the
basically.
first thing he says is like, are you a lawyer? And I'm like, no, I'm not a lawyer. And he goes, so then why are you advising people on negligence? I'm like, I don't know. Did I do that? He's like, well, you wrote this article. And I'm like, okay, But anyway, long story short, I got appointed to that Special Litigation Committee. And it was the only security person on that committee. And my job was to really explain what took place, break down the technical stuff into like plain English, give my opinions on things. But at the end of the day, I'm not the one who makes the recommendation back to the court on what to do. That's the lawyers who do that.
You're just teeing it up for them so they can understand, basically.
Right. Right. And throughout, from a security guy's standpoint, the brokenness in that information security program and the series of events that took place, it was like, man, this is just, it was novice. I mean, it was so bad. It was just like, what the hell, the way things went down. And so over and over again, the lawyers would ask, in your opinion, Evan, was this something they should have taken care of? Like, absolutely, man. I mean, there's so many places where they missed this and they should have hit this. It's basics. It's fundamentals. This isn't like you need some, next gen something to catch this breach. And then they would always ask every single time, in the other companies that you've worked with, was this uncommon? And it was like, well, no. I mean, it's fairly common for this to be shitty. It's shitty everywhere. And so then, but the reason why they kept asking that was because that was the negligence bar. As long as everybody's doing shitty, you're not negligent for doing shitty.
Yeah, you're with the herd.
Right. And so it doesn't matter if the herd's running off the cliff, as long as you're in the herd, you're not going to be negligent. Your business will still get breached. You'll still, do a disservice to your customers and a disservice to your stakeholders, but you won't get sued. Or if you do get sued, your liability will be significantly lower.
So, do you think that is why, like, every place I've been, the business leaders are always like, well, what are our peers doing?
Yeah, that's why they asked that.
So instead of doing the right thing because it's the right thing, we just want to be in line with our peers. So we're not negligent, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Or it's easier to not be negligent, I guess.
Right. So as long as everybody's doing shit work, nobody's negligent. Whereas, logically it would tell you, well, if we're all making shitty choices, we're all negligent. None of us. I mean, the shitty choices should have consequences, but there's no consequence. That's the problem. And so when there is a breach that takes place, like take Change Healthcare, that's a breach that I would guess if you went and asked 10 people off the streets, just 10 random people about, did you hear about the Change Healthcare breach? What'd you think about it? I think, what do you think? 8, 9 wouldn't even know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, probably. Maybe less.
That was a really bad breach.
Yeah, I mean, I think the media does a good job. I mean, part of what you talk about in your chapter is it's all about PR now. It's not. I mean, back in the day, maybe 6 years ago, they were, oh yeah, you have a cyber attack, you're gonna, damage your reputation, whatever. But we figured out how to fucking manipulate that. Like, it's not even a thing anymore. I don't think. Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, I think and so when you look at, so from an accountability standpoint, you either have, from a legal accountability standpoint, you either have criminal, right? You broke the law. And the law, in a criminal matter, and again, I'm not a lawyer. I just have been around too many fucking lawyers. In a criminal matter, the victim is seen as society. Society is the victim. He is the one prosecuting the criminal or alleged criminal. And and the burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So criminal acts, arson, robbery, murder, rape, there's lots of criminal things that you can do. And each one of those has, kind of a penalty. The way the law works with criminal law is the victim is society. It's prosecuted by a county prosecutor, city prosecutor, federal prosecutor, whoever, right? But it's somebody who represents the community. And then, usually there's incarceration over like monetary fines. Maybe there's a restitution, something like that. So that's one way to be held accountable. Another way to be held accountable would be civil law. So civil law is, somebody files suit against you, alleging something, negligence in something. And so in that case,
the lawyers usually get all that money.
Well, exactly. And that's kind of, I mean, coming full circle. And I think that's something I need to add to this chapter is, what role does the legal community play in all of this?
I think they play the role we think they play. I think they
don't.
They're more of a bodyguard instead of a representative of the people.
And I think they like the status quo. They're making a shitload of money.
I would agree.
So in civil law, the offender, the plaintiff, whereas criminal, it was community, it was, society. In civil law, it's a party, it's a person or a group of people in a class action, something like that, where they've been wronged in some way. And so they file suit. And in a civil case, it's preponderance of evidence. So in a criminal, you had the burden of proof was proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, it's preponderance of evidence. So tip the scales one way or the other. That's where the negligence piece comes in and all that other shit. The third type is administrative law. That's where the government has, like Department of Health and Human Services, for instance, they enforce HIPAA. So HIPAA is an administrative law. It's a regulation. And if you break that, or you're found, to have broken those directives, then the prosecutor in that case is the agency, right? It would be lawyers for the Department of Health and Human Services in case of, healthcare. For in case of GLBA, that's banking, that would be somebody from the FDIC, depending on where the charter's at, right, for the bank. And in that case, the court itself is actually the agency as well. So you really have you're kind of fucked in that one, right? I wouldn't even fight it. What I would do is, because I've been there too, it's just treat them really nice without being obvious about trying to tip that scale, but hey, let's go out to dinner. I mean, just be nice, when they say something, compliment them a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Good job.
Yeah. Social engineer the shit out of them as much as you can. And hopefully, what they'll come back with is some order that's not going to, break the bank. So those three types of accountability from a legal perspective. Other types of accountability that I can think of off the top of my head is customers. If customers feel like they've been wronged, if customers feel like you've betrayed their trust, then they may leave and go somewhere else. You've got stakeholder accountability. You might lose your job.
Do you think customers even care anymore?
Well, that's the thing, right? So the legal piece is, in my opinion, it's just complete bullshit, right? When you talk about criminal prosecution,
it's just lipstick on the pig, right? Basically.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, on the civil side, it's funny because I saw way back when, I don't remember, a year or two ago, there was a poll that was put out by the Cybersecurity Hub, I think, on LinkedIn, and they'd asked who's ultimately, keyword ultimately, you have to be literal with this shit. So who's ultimately responsible for information security in an organization? And your choices were CEO, board of directors, CIO, and CISO, maybe. I don't remember exactly. So I'm kind of paraphrasing. So in that, the right answer for that is the board of directors.
If there is one, right?
If there is one, right. And I would assume, being that was part of the answers, that,
we're assuming that.
Yeah. If there's not, then the owner, if there's an owner, an ownership group, somebody at the top, right? And so, but the sad thing was, out of like 32,000, responses to this poll, 23% got it right. And so that, I was like, what the hell? Like, am I wrong? I started to question myself. Like, I've been in enough of this shit over the years that it's an obvious answer. It's the board of directors who are ultimately responsible, whether they're held responsible or not, or held accountable. That's another
That's
story.
What we're talking about.
Right. And so, being that I was questioning myself, I got a group of, I don't know, 4 lawyers together. I wouldn't call them friends. I don't really have any lawyers that are friends, I don't think. And the way you get lawyers to go to lunch with you is just pay. They'll show up for sure. And especially if they can figure out a way to make it billable. So these lawyers showed up and I asked them the same question, in your guys' opinion, who's ultimately responsible for information security in an organization? And even before I was even able to give them the options, they had already said the board of directors. And so I was like, that's what I thought. And so here's my problem. Why then don't we hold them accountable? And they got honest with me because I think they thought that we were friends, but they said that honestly, it's because most of the people in the legal community don't really know how information security works. So I'm like, okay, so you have people trying these cases then on a criminal, and and they rely on people like you and me as expert witnesses. But then as an expert witness, if I'm telling you straight out, in my opinion, this is terrible. I mean, you should be held accountable for that. And then you come back to me and say, well, does everybody else do that? Well, yeah, but everybody's doing it terrible. That's the problem. We got to fix this damn problem.
So yeah, then the lawyer goes back to you're in the herd. They're not really looking at it on a case by case basis. They're looking at it from a larger grand scheme of things, which it shouldn't be like that. Every company runs their own program. We're not running a big, collaborative thing.
Right. And so it's no wonder, when you think about, the extent and, and the ripple effect of lack of accountability in this industry, it's no wonder you struggle, I struggle, all CISOs struggle with getting the proper attention that we need from the board of directors. Like, we don't need to dominate the damn meeting. We don't even need 15 minutes on the agenda, but we need to figure out, like, how do I put you in a position as the board of directors? If you're the ones who are ultimately responsible for information security here, what do I communicate to you to essentially, you can keep your finger on the pulse of it, right? So if you think like a car, like a speedometer, or we talk about like the S2 score or something that we can give them to track.
Do you think people don't have enough cojones? So I'm thinking,
Well, yeah, because I mean, who's got your back? The law doesn't.
because if you go, right, you get 15 minutes to go in and talk to the board, right? And you're trying to get something approved, that is going to get approved by the CFO, CEO, whatever. If you're talking to the board, they're probably not there. It's just you talking to them more than likely. But you're not going to say, they're not giving me budget and this is our biggest risk because they're scared that that's going to come back and maybe hurt them potentially.
Maybe.
I mean, I haven't gotten to that level yet, but that's something I think people are more defensive of their current job position than they are in wanting to do the right thing. I hear it a lot. It's a career limiting move. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? It means you're not wanting to take a risk. Businesses operate on risk.
Well, and the thing is, I think you're not going to get here with accountability like we should until something is, sadly, it's going to take something catastrophic. It's going to take something that's really going to wake people up and make them ask questions, difficult questions that people don't have answers to. You would have thought that it would have happened after the CrowdStrike thing last year because that was so like in your face.
It impacted everything around the world.
But what changes did people demand from it?
The people, not so much. Customers, I mean, we got more control and more transparency, but it's not like a fix, I guess. There's no real I got free lunch.
Right. Well, and none of that stuff is going to change the law.
Right.
Like, if you want to change the law, then the public has to get up in arms about it. And I would guess, again, go talk. We should do this sometime. Just go out and talk to like 10 random strangers on the street and say, hey, what do you remember about the CrowdStrike incident last year?
Well, I've done that a couple of times. Everyone thinks it was a Microsoft thing.
And so
And then
that's
you
it.
talk to other vendors, and other vendors still blame Microsoft because of the way it hooked to the kernel or whatever. So it's like no one actually wants to talk about the real problem, right? It's crazy.
Right. Well, okay, so then let's say it's a Microsoft problem. That's it?
Yeah,
We just
Microsoft.
chalk it up to Microsoft and like, yeah, that's
fuck
it.
it.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, Microsoft's pretty much bigger than anything in the world. So I mean, I think everyone's scared, honestly.
Scared to say something?
Yeah.
That's sad because the people who actually suffer through these breaches are the people. It's the public.
I think that's where we have the challenge. We do suffer, like we understand that our data's out there, like there's the things we understand that. But traditional law, you were talking about earlier, right? Suffering, murder, death, rape, injury, that's how we traditionally think about harm. So so what's really interesting is we don't put a value on the data. However, we put value on data when they're fucking selling it about us, but we can't put it on when it's lost. Seems like we already have that value defined. We just don't want to
Right.
look at it.
But then it's never on a balance sheet.
Right. I brought that up too. People were like, "Huh, that's interesting," and then that's about it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if it's so valuable to a company, then what's the value of it, and why doesn't it show up as an asset on the financial statements? I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, I have brought that up before with CPAs, and you get a variety of just like kind of bullshit answers, but really no answer.
I
Because
mean, you could.
if you did put a value to the data, well, then I would have to conduct an inventory of my data, right? Which would be actually
No one wants to
prudent,
do
I would
that.
think.
Yeah, it's
Right.
hard.
But then on the other side, it's like, okay, I have this valuable asset in my organization called data. I don't know where it is. I don't know how much it's worth, but I know I make a shitload of money off of it. I don't know what's proper care of the data. That seems negligent.
When you
I
put it
mean, it
like
seems
that,
irresponsible.
yeah, it's like you're gonna buy a car in Chicago and you just leave it on the south side with the windows open. Like you just don't care.
With a baby in the back.
Yep. In summer. Yep.
Yeah. With the baby
Yep.
in the back, and then the baby dies and nobody gets held accountable for it. And that's extreme. But
Yeah.
when you look at like,
They're trying to make it feel real though, that's the intention of it.
well, so when the data breaches happen, I think the costs involved with responding to the breach, the legal costs involved, potentially fines, things like that, materially to a business, most businesses that are of size, it's cost of doing business. It doesn't really, they'll just pass that cost on to their consumers, to their customers. So they're not going to lose money. The data that it belonged to, so like my personally identifiable information, my medical records, my whatever, it's monetized in a way, if and when it is monetized, it's monetized in a way where I may not notice it for quite some time. And by that time that it actually gets monetized, I probably forgot about the damn breach anyway. And so let's say that, my identity gets stolen through this. How the hell will I know, as the victim of a stolen identity, how the hell will I know which breach it came from and who did it or anything? I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah, you don't
Yet
have the
I'm going to be the one
skill,
that's held responsible for putting that shit back together again and whatever costs are incurred from it.
but you get free 1 year credit monitoring. Don't forget.
Thank God for that. Yeah, and it was interesting. I mean, I remember when the big three, Equifax, TransUnion, the other one. I can't remember the other one.
The one that I always forget.
Equifax, TransUnion, and I can't remember. But
Wow.
anyway, I remember when they gave you they stopped charging you for the ability to freeze your credit reports.
Experian. There you go.
Experian. Yeah, you used to have to pay to freeze your credit report.
So you can freeze it for free now. However, it's a pain in the ass, and every time you log in, they're like, "Do you want to subscribe for like $50?" And you can now get dark web monitoring. Like if I froze my credit, why do I need to pay for something else? You're already taken care of, bro.
Well, and here's the shitty thing about all of this. You talk about, take my social security number. That's a number I have zero control over. I didn't create the damn number. I didn't ask for the damn number. You just gave me a damn number. And then I have to use that number whenever I go and apply for credit or whatever. And then on the back end, there's somebody who collects all this data about that number. And yes, I probably signed something in the loan documents that allowed that to happen, but it's buried in legal mumbo jumbo bullshit. Plus, I need the fucking loans. Whatever,
Yeah.
I need the damn loan. I'm trying to buy a house, trying to raise a family, whatever. And then on the back end, you've got, these big three credit bureaus who are making money off of my data, like billions of dollars.
Big money.
Right.
Which, by the way, Equifax said your data, even though we make billions, is worth like $13. That's what your settlement would have been for their breach.
Yeah, which is just nuts. And how do I opt out of them collecting that data?
Can't usually.
Right. So somewhere I gave you permission in one of the legal documents that I signed for some loan somewhere, but I had no choice. If I wanted the damn loan, I mean, it's extortion at its best.
Opt in versus opt out culture.
So I'm extorted into handing over this stuff, and then you collect it, you make all the money off of it. And then let's say, it gets compromised and the data that you're now maintaining about me is no longer accurate. But somehow it's my responsibility to fix it.
And
If
then
you're the
you have
fucking custodian of that data, why isn't it your job to maintain accurate data about me? It shouldn't be my job to do that. That should be your job. I'm not empowered at all to do anything with this.
yeah, you're not the database admin.
Right. So, and there, I mean, on and on and on again, we could go through all the ways that me as a consumer, I'm a victim. And I don't feel the pain because it's just, this is the way things are. This is just the way you do things. Right. So you just accept it. You know, you're getting used, you know, you're getting abused, but you know, I'm always been used and abused. So you just like, it's okay. And then they just keep pushing it further and further. What about your medical records?
Yeah, it's everything now. It used to be, you know,
Right.
whatever, credit card,
So
but it's scaled up.
our privacy is completely gone. There is no such thing as privacy.
Do you want to talk about the golden parachute problem and how that, I mean,
Well, you
that
want to go
kind
through
of,
some examples of like breaches and what typically happens
well,
kind of
I
thing?
was just trying to like make sure we hit everything in your chapter here. Like,
What's that long? It's an 18-page chapter.
yeah, but we don't have to like talk about the things. We already talked about like a couple things in the executives and accountability, but we didn't really talk about, you know, the golden parachute that executives get and potentially like why that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, for sure. So when a big breach happens, you know, an executive loses their job, maybe. Typically they don't, but you know, there are times when they do, or they step down, you know, at
Yeah,
the
they're
recommendation of the board or whatever, resign, or what do they call that? Retire.
right.
And usually it's with a huge severance package. So I think, who am I trying to think of? With the Equifax breach, what was his name? Richard Smith. The CEO, Richard Smith, when he walked away, he resigned or retired, you know, semantics. He had an $18 million pension. There was no financial penalty whatsoever uh, applied to him.
You think he sleeps okay at night?
Yeah.
Or do you
Yeah.
think
Money.
he's bothered?
I don't know. You know, I think you need a conscience for that.
Be
No,
interesting
I
if
don't know him.
someone knows Richard Smith and we could get him on. That'd be pretty,
Or get Richard Smith himself. That'd be kind of
yeah.
fun.
Like ask like what do you think? So I'm kind of curious because you are, you know, you got companies, you've been an executive, founder, all of that, but you've also been in the CISO role. And I think you have the interesting perspective of I was a CISO, I felt pressure because, you know, they go after the CISOs now, right? They're generally the fall person, but also you're on the other side now, like how do you how did you get to where you are? Because I imagine when you were the CISO, it was probably like that's just the way it is. Like I know I'm the fall guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the last CISO job I had, like when I went pre, you know, FR Secure, I was CISO for a, you know, $4 billion pharmaceutical company. It was a public company called MGI Pharma. I was really fortunate. I had an amazing leadership team. I mean, amazing. The CEO, Lonnie Mulder, shout out to him. Great culture. He was very much interested in doing the right thing. It was just a really well run company, in my opinion. So I think had there been, you know, there were always incidents. You know, people that said that they've never had an incident are just not watching because incidents are happening all the time. You just classify them. Some are minor incidents. They're not even worth, you know, telling anybody
Right.
about.
Just your manager, right? It's
Right.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't have any significant incidents, public data breaches that happened while I was there. I don't know what would have happened had that happened. I think just knowing what I knew about that leadership team, I don't think I would have been thrown under the bus. You know, other companies, yeah, you've got different motivations for CEOs and board of directors. And I think as a CISO, you have to understand, like I've been accused many times on the consulting side of things of social engineering companies, you know, because yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. You know,
I mean, we're
honestly,
trying to get you to do the right thing because you're not wanting
yeah,
to.
not for my benefit. I mean, if you have a breach, it's your damn company. I mean, I'm just here. But I think CISOs should educate themselves more about what the real roles and responsibilities should be in the organization and take a bold approach that if a breach does occur, I'm not going to be the fall guy. I mean, you can fire me, that's fine. But understand that, I'm making these recommendations to you, to the board, to the CEO, being fully defensible, right? And so when shit hits the fan and I get called in to a Senate hearing or I get called into, some legal proceeding, I was prudent. I took prudent steps all along the way. My job, to be crystal clear, in every organization is I consult the business to make good risk decisions, and then I implement those risk decisions. That's what I do. And so I don't make the risk decisions. If you make poor risk decisions, that's on you. You know what I mean? And I think, and that's part of writing this part of the book is putting it out there publicly, like be bold as CISOs. You're not the ones who are ultimately responsible for information security in an organization. You have to put it where it's at so that when you make recommendations, don't be afraid to make the recommendation. If in your opinion, this is a good risk decision for the company to make, then say it. If you don't say it, then you're not defensible. You have no record that you ever said it. So, you point out these things like we should have multi-factor authentication on our website or whatever, right? And then come to find out later that that was the way into the network. Well, if I said something, I'm defensible. If I was afraid to say something, and this is an obvious one maybe, but there's all kinds of risks that we encounter when we do our risk assessments and things like that. If I'm afraid to say something, because I've been there before too, where I have been a vCISO for an organization that had a breach. And then I was questioned by executive management and questioned by the board of directors. Why didn't you tell us about this? It's like, actually, I did. I did tell you about this. I told you about this on September 27th, Oh, shit,
Why
yeah, I
didn't we
get it.
listen?
Well, and so you can, talking from a social engineering standpoint, what a great opportunity for me then to establish credibility with this board of directors. Instead of pointing fingers at each other, you missed it. We missed it. I mean, let's just admit that we missed it, learn from it. I mean, there's a lot of benefit to transparency in incident response. When you have an incident, you have a window of opportunity to control the message without lying, without being irresponsible, but sounding responsible, being transparent with your customers, and you can actually come out, I think, ahead after a bad thing happening because it's not the bad thing happening that you need to be
People
accountable
respect
for.
transparency.
Right. It's not the bad thing happening that you need to be held accountable for. It's the shitty choices you made that made the bad things happen before and after, right? It's the shitty choices. Shit happens. We're going to have breaches. The name of this game is not risk elimination. The name of this game is risk management. So when a breach happens, am I defensible? And so as a vCISO, as a CISO, that's the question you need to ask yourself in that position. Am I defensible? Personally. Did I do my job well? Did I say the things I was supposed to say? Did I cover my bases? Did I document, my risk recommendations that I had made to the board or the CEO? Was I not able to get time with the board? Document that. These are the times when I attempted to get FaceTime with the board to whatever it is. So your job as a CISO is to understand how this is supposed to work. And if it's not working the way it's supposed to work, you need to cover your bases. So, I don't think there are certainly CISOs who suck at their jobs. There's plenty of those, but there's also a lot of CISOs, I think, who take their jobs very seriously, that want to do the right thing, that are just not empowered to do the right thing, and so instead of stressing out about that, just cover yourself.
What would empowerment look like and mean to you?
Well, so I put that in the chapter. I think empowerment is, if my job is to consult the business to make good information security risk decisions, I need to be empowered and enabled to do that. So who is the one who makes the risk decisions? Well, it'd be the board of directors, ultimately. Now, they can delegate that, but it needs to be clear on how that's delegated, right? If you delegate that to an information security committee, then we need to charter that. We need to have a charter that documents that that's where you've delegated these risk decisions, and understand that those risk decisions are going to end up creating our budget. So when that budget comes back as a budget number based on the risk decisions that this delegate made, and you don't approve the you don't approve the budget, well, then you didn't approve the risk decisions. So, I mean, you just have to figure out the governance structure that's going to work. So you have to enable me to consult the business to make good risk decisions. I need to be able to do risk assessments. I need people to be transparent with me when I ask them how things work in the various parts of the business. Yeah. And then I need to be empowered and enabled to implement those risk decisions. So that's the reason why we don't ask as CISOs to report to the board or report to the CEO because we're power hungry. We ask to do that because those are the people that need to make the risk decisions, So
That makes
that's what
sense.
that's what it would take.
So then, I mean, there's a lot of complaining and stuff I hear, like we have CISOs now, right? It's a chief information officer, but it almost seems like they're not really treated as an executive, even though they have the C title. So they should be at the level of the CFO and stuff, but they're not.
No, I
It
agree with that.
seems kind of weird.
Yeah, even if you're in the same place from a reporting structure standpoint. And I think a big reason why that is because I think a lot of CISOs don't speak the language of business. The language of business is not information security. The language of business is accounting. The language of business is money. And so the CFO is always going to get, what did you say? I mean, they're always going to get the attention. So start speaking like they do. I mean, look at them. Just like learn from them. Like, okay, maybe I should learn how to read financial statements because that's the language of business. Maybe I should understand how every line item in my information security budget, how does that affect the financials of the business? If we don't spend these dollars, how does that affect the financials of the business? If I, as a CISO, especially when you come into an organization that I think has been doing information security wrong for so long, that's a great opportunity as a CISO or a vCISO to gain instant credibility because, conceptually, and the reality is complexity is the worst enemy of information security. So walking into an environment, if I can simplify the environment, if I can simplify the communications, simplify processes, simplify technology, simplify, everything that I can do to simplify equates to an improved bottom line, more money. Right. And so as a CISO, if I'm coming into an environment, or as a vCISO coming into an environment that's been doing it wrong or hasn't been doing it at all, maybe there's probably a shitload of tech debt here. There's probably a lot of sprawl. So simplify the environment, get rid of, 10, 20, 100 $1 million worth of tech debt. And now almost instantly I'm getting listened to, not as much as the CFO, but pretty damn close. Because they view me as like, oh shit, I didn't know. CISOs do that.
Where did you come from? Did you go to
Yeah,
business school?
but that's part of that social engineering the organization, right? I've preached that CEOs are people, board members are people. People have egos. People have motivations, right? And so before over the years, you learn, okay, is this CEO primarily driven by ego, money, or mission? It's typically one of those three buckets. It's not exclusive, but one's dominant. And so if it's ego, well, that's how I'm going to position my messaging when I communicate with that person. If it's money, well, then we're going to talk money all the time. So I think a lot of CISOs maybe lack the skills of understanding how to navigate people, how to navigate business, how to navigate, these hurdles that get put in our way. But if my job, again, is to consult the business to make good information security risk decisions, and I can't navigate those things, then maybe I do suck at my job. Because you hear a lot of CISOs saying, well, I can't ever get time with the CEO. I can't ever get time with the board of directors. Well, Okay, work on it. Maybe you suck at consulting the business to make good information security risk decisions. Maybe you suck at this. I mean, you have to address that, because if you do suck at this, well, then it's going to be hard for you to be defensible when the shit hits the fan. But if you are good at this, like, what things did you try? Well, I tried this, I tried that, I tried this, and I kept getting into roadblocks and whatever. Well, then just continue to document those things and you'll be defensible when the shit hits the fan. Because then they'll say, why didn't we know about this? Well, I fucking tried. I've been trying for the last 3 fucking years to get on the goddamn agenda here, you know? So if you want to fire me, feel free. You didn't
All
fix the
right.
damn problem by getting rid of me.
I'll just leave this here for the next guy.
Right. But,
Oh,
and I think a lot of CISOs that you've seen in the big breaches have probably been fairly good CISOs. Like for instance, in that Equifax breach was Susan Molden. She was, in my opinion, a good CISO. I didn't know her personally, but she got drugged through the coals, right? Because she had a degree in music.
yeah.
It's like, that doesn't
Don't
mean you
matter.
suck at your job because you have a degree in music, and you don't have to have a degree in information security to be good at this.
That's all the right. People think you should be a tech CISO. Like,
But I think Susan, because you have to take into account too, like what probably would have, I mean, I don't have this knowledge exactly, but I think what probably went down is, Susan, we're going to let you go. You're going to be, probably not going to come right out and say, we're going to make you the fall guy for this, but we're going to offer you a severance package of something. And in order for you to get that severance package, you have to sign this NDA. And so you won't be able to defend
talk.
yourself essentially
Yeah.
in the public eye. So you kind of end up, to the public, the perception is that she must have sucked at her job. She didn't come out and defend herself well, she couldn't probably.
Yeah. Should lock down.
Yeah. It's just a dirty pool thing.
So what is the cost of doing business then? Well, if that's the experience the CISO has, on the way out, regulatory stuff, laws, how do you think we're doing on that stuff?
On the laws, like compliance.
Just like any sort of like the computer fraud law or CCPA or like any of that stuff that's supposed to be helpful.
Well, I mean, those are criminal ones. I think if you want to look at the effectiveness of the law, how many criminals have been prosecuted under that and, been found guilty? And, there are definitely some, but compare that to the number of crimes that are committed every day online, and it's
Not
shit.
even close. Yeah.
So the law, is that the law then, or is it law enforcement, the ability to enforce the law? I think there's you could go down a bunch of rabbit holes that way, but I think just like any law, there's so many laws in the books that they're on the books, but nobody enforces the damn thing. So it's like, I mean, that's what I think is happening a lot with the
We need
border
a
stuff.
we need a new law, bro. This one's better.
Well, like, look at the border stuff. You know what I mean? It's not like it just wasn't enforced, for a really long time. And then you have a president comes in who decides he's going to enforce it. And it's like, holy shit, I can see it from both ways. What it should have been is enforced from the get-go. That way people wouldn't have been fooled into thinking, they wouldn't have been fooled into this false sense of security. Like, I'm okay. I've been here for 10 years now, undocumented. I'm fine because
Go, right.
nobody's coming to enforce anything. And then next thing ICE is knocking on your door. I mean, what a shitty place for those people to be in, because our government can't figure out how to fucking enforce a law.
Or make a smooth process for them to come legally.
Right. So I think it's, from a criminal law perspective, I think that's the same kind of thing that happens in our industry. You have to, and you don't blame, like, the law enforcement people that do the work, I think are really,
They're
they're,
trying.
they're doing the best job they possibly can, but they're not empowered to do it. You would need, a budget 100 times the size it is now if you actually wanted to go after the criminals.
So what about public-private relationships, right? There's all these things like the InfoGuards and the things like that where, you have these outreach programs to create relationships with, the prosecutors. Do you think that's helpful at all? I mean,
Yeah.
really, maybe
I
the
think
private sector needs to cooperate more, maybe the public needs to cooperate more, maybe we're just like fighting each other even though we're trying to work together.
I think it's got to be I think the ones that are more grassroots are definitely healthier than the ones because a lot of those are driven by sponsorships or driven by vendors who are trying to sell you shit.
Mhm.
So it just totally muddies the waters on, the advice that you're getting. So, it's a double-edged sword. It's like anything else. I think it can be used for good or for bad. What I would love to see, if you really wanted to change the laws in this country, I think you have to get the people, like the people, like, mom and dad.
Muckatelli on the street.
Exactly. Because a politician's job isn't to serve their constituents. A politician's job is to get reelected. And if as long as this doesn't become an election issue, it's never going to be addressed.
Well, they use the same 5 issues every 4 years because it keeps everyone distracted from anything real. Because those 5 issues are very emotional and obviously they divide everybody and it
Right.
works.
Oh, yeah. And the things they do around information security when they have the occasional Senate committee meeting, post
They let
breach.
Zuckerberg walk out. Like, dude, fucking slap him or something. I don't know.
Well, it's all window dressing bullshit. It's all
Yeah.
just like, it's, it's theater. It's not, nothing comes of it.
It's to make the public feel like they're doing something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And sadly, I think the end game, we just continue to adopt new technologies much faster than our ability to use it responsibly. The consequences just kind of keep building up. It's like it's like building up a debt, and eventually the chickens come home to roost, right? And it might be, I mean, shit. There's also, there's another chapter of the book where I talk about, software. Anywhere between 15 to 50 now, 15 to 50 errors per thousand lines of code is generally what finds its way into its way to the consumer.
Are you reading about this thing they're calling now vibe coders? Have you heard about that?
Oh, I haven't heard about it. What is it?
I mean, my understanding is it's basically no one knows how to code anymore. They're just copying everybody else's stuff. Like,
Yeah, using open source libraries and everything, just
yeah.
making calls. Yeah.
So really, are you developing anything? Probably not.
Well, and the shit that you are developing, yeah, that's a whole nother chapter. But in terms of like accountability, so let's say, 15 to 50 errors per thousand lines of code. My Ford truck has an estimated 150 million lines of code that run it. So if you do the math, 150 million lines of code, 15 to 50 errors per thousand lines of code, you can do the math and figure out that there's a shitload of bugs in that software. The types of bugs would be functional bugs, meaning functions that are supposed to work don't work, or some of those are security vulnerabilities. But the fact of the matter is, my life depends on the stability of that code, right? And so we just continue to march down this path. And what happens if an attacker figures out how to, run all the Ford trucks off the road or the
Yeah.
Teslas off the road or God knows what? I mean, whatever,
They
right?
made a movie about that.
The vulnerability. I mean, it's crazy how sometimes the movies are good predictors of what the future is coming, what future is coming.
What future is possible or what is coming? Yeah.
Right. I mean, we already had like last year, I don't know how many people were stuck at airports, how
Oh
many
yeah,
people,
millions.
and what came of it. Obviously, it didn't hurt enough because people, just the psychology of people, they only make changes if There's a benefit. The benefit is enough to make me do something. Like you might win $1 million if you do this thing. Well, shit, all right, I'll do it. Or it hurts. Yeah, like, fuck, when I put my hand on that stove, that hurt like a motherfucker, so I moved my goddamn hand. And so as long as you stay within those boundaries from an industry perspective, it's going to be the wild, wild west until something hurts enough. Because I don't think you're going to get, people are already so focused on the benefit thing. The general, consensus is, well, it's never going to happen to me. I don't need to change password on my router. It's nothing going to happen, not going to happen to me. And then if it does, then you're like, all right, so what? It didn't hurt enough to make me change my habits. Eventually something will happen that will hurt enough, and then you'll wish you would have, been responsible, I think, from the get-go. But at that point, usually what happens, just because you see this happen with breaches all the time, kind of a microcosm of this, organizations don't take information security seriously for years, and then a breach happens. So the pendulum, it's like a pendulum. It was way over here on the left. They weren't taking it seriously. They were ignorant. They were just, whatever, no budget. Then a breach happens. Like, oh shit. Then the pendulum swings way over to the other side. And now you got all the budget in the world.
And then they go and buy all the fucking tools in the world to think.
Right.
And now you're basically recreating the exact same problem. It just looks different.
You're almost creating a worse problem if you have somebody who doesn't know how to do it well, because then you get a false sense of security, right? I would rather have, at least if I don't have any security and I know I don't have any security, I'm not fooled into thinking I have security. But if the false sense of security is the worst, because like I'm not even looking behind me anymore because I got a thing back there that protects me.
Right.
Whereas if I didn't have a thing back there to protect me, I'd be looking around like, is there something back there? I think false sense of security is worse than no security. I think it's worse to misspend an information security dollar than it is. I mean, it's worse. Yeah, it's worse to misspend an information security dollar than it is to not spend an information security dollar. Because at least one way I know I'm not fooled. So in terms of, what typically happens, in terms of accountability, so shit hits the fan, something bad happens, immediately everybody goes into, unless you're prepared for it, immediately everybody goes into self-preservation mode. It's the fight or flight. Unless you've been there before, it'd be like, when you were training in the Marine Corps, you're trained under sometimes some pretty high pressure situations, maybe live fire, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's to get you to be calm, to process, to not, react with emotion. But if you haven't been through that stuff before, it's fight or flight. I mean, you're out, and usually it's flight, right?
You don't know what's going to happen when it happens.
Yeah. And so you sort of panic, fear drives most of what you're doing. Typically that's what happens, after a breach. Everybody goes into self-preservation mode. They start thinking, well, what did I do?
How do I protect myself?
Yeah. Yeah. And so in all of that, the CEO is thinking that, the board of directors is thinking that, the CIO is thinking that, the CFO is thinking that, the CISOs thinking that, everybody's thinking that. And the natural place to go, information, it was a breach. Well, it's the information security guy. That just makes logical sense, doesn't it? I mean, I don't have to make much of a case to the public that it's the security guy.
Right. Security guy, protect security. Yeah. It's a logical conclusion.
Right. So it just fits natural. Most people won't question it. I think unless you know better, it's like, that's not the guy or the gal. What was the CEO doing? What was the board of directors doing? Because all these breaches, I've been in 2 derivative action suits, which is where shareholders filed, case against the board of directors in an attempt to hold the board of directors responsible for information security. And actually they put it they position it usually as asset protection, kind of what they call it. Right. But in both times, I only know of one case of all the cases where there's been derivative actions after a breach, one case where it proceeded past that first hurdle. The first hurdle is to make the recommendation to the judge on how to proceed. If the recommendation is we think there might have been negligence here, We make the recommendation to the court that you do proceed. Then it's got to do the whole courty court thing. And then a lot of times those things are settled out of court, right? Because
Yeah.
if you go
You
all
don't
the
want it
way,
public.
right? Because then you've got discovery, right? And discovery's like, all right,
Yeah.
now all our
You
dirty
don't want
laundry.
that.
No.
Do you
So,
think they should be teaching some of this in business school then? So like they come out and they know that that's their job. Maybe they don't know. Like you said, the CISO isn't telling them that this is your job. Like I'm telling you, this is the thing. You gotta help me help you make your decision. But they don't teach that in business school.
you mean like business school catered to like the CEO and the businessy people,
Mm-hmm.
that they need to be more cognizant, I think, of cybersecurity and information security stuff, and seek
Mm-hmm.
out this information? Yeah, I think it would be a great idea. But I think in post secondary schools, there's no real standardization on the way they approach information security. No.
Yeah.
So it's,
Everyone wants to do their own thing.
well, yeah, and there's a lot of ego in a lot of faculty at post secondary schools. So when you go and
Yeah.
try to tell them, like, hey, I think maybe you could teach us a little bit better or something, no.
I think you need to stop letting these kids run Kali Linux and actually have them contribute to
You could
something.
maybe, yeah. I mean, they teach them a lot of the what, but not the how, you know, and some of the what even, I mean, it's top. A lot of your college professors are academics, so they're not practitioners
Yeah, they've never
necessarily.
done it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think we could do a hell of a lot more on the education side for CISOs just to prepare themselves for these types of things and how to put yourself in that defensible situation, because it's going to come. I mean, there's no way to stop it, really. There's a security breach. Who do you call? CISO,
Ghostbusters.
right? And initially, it's you're nice to the CISO initially, typically because they're in the middle of the incident response, and you need them to get things back, in order, I guess. But it doesn't take long before the finger pointing starts happening, and all the fingers, most of the fingers are going to come back to you, and so you got to be ready to defend against that. I'm not the guy, that you should be pointing the fingers at. I made these recommendations or I missed them. Sometimes that happens too, right? As a CISO, the way this breach took place, I missed that. I didn't make that recommendation. It wasn't on the risk register. It wasn't, whatever.
Right.
Okay, well, that might have been a shitty choice on your part, and you might have to pay the consequence. Hopefully, it's not public enough to where you can, still land another job and just learn from it.
Dock some pay.
Yeah. I mean, I said it one time in the middle of an incident response. Actually, I walked into the room and it didn't go over well because what should we do? And I said, well, update your resume. And I meant that as a joke, but they didn't take that as a joke.
They didn't know you very well, apparently.
So you're going to have the blame game for sure. You just got to be ready for it. And then
So
it's going to
what the
be the PR messaging is going to start coming out, right? Because you need a position. Now, if you're I think if you're a good CISO in a good situation, the blame game, try to deflect it. It's not going to help us. The blame game is not going to help us internally as a team. And so ideally, as you've done your incident response planning and you've done, the tabletop exercises and whatever, you've discussed this and it's understood, it's documented, whatever. But taking a unified approach certainly will play better for you on the PR approach. You have two audiences for your PR. You have the internal audience and you have the external audience.
a lot of times you don't tell the internal audience.
You need to, though. That's where people, I think, screw up, because on
How
the
do you
internal audience, I have a saying that empty spaces always get filled. And so if there's an empty space in the communication, it's going to get filled with something. What it usually gets filled with is assumptions or rumors.
so then do you say it right away? Do you wait a year? Because I mean, there's got to be some sort of thought that, if I tell the employees that, this thing happened, they're gonna
Oh no, you
leave.
don't. You don't need to tell them what happened or any of the sensitive stuff, you just need to communicate with them. You need to figure out what your message is going to be so that you can quell the assumptions and the rumors. Because if it's a public enough breach, it's not like the news media is only going to call your PR department. They're going to look for any employee anywhere
Anybody.
that's going to leak some shit so they can get the exclusive on it. So you have to, have that internal PR piece that, can keep the unity of the company, assure everybody that things are well under control. We've got it, shit like that. Address the things that have been leaked out into the news media, because, things will, could happen where, something went on Twitter, like this happened at so-and-so organization, being able to address that, internally with your team is important. So you're going to have, when you talk about accountability, the first thing I'm trying to do, because like everybody, I think, defend myself, right? At the end of the day, we don't work for companies. At the end of the day, you work for yourself and you work for your family. I love my company, well, FR Secure, I actually do work, it's different. At all the companies I worked for, I didn't actually work for them. I did my best for them, but it was for me and my family. I had to put food on the table. I wanted my kids to have a great upbringing and all that other shit. So on the accountability standpoint, knowing that part of what comes with the job is the blame game is going to come. I need to be ready for it. I need to, understand that PR is going to come. And I never want to be, so that the next section in that chapter is about the powerless CISO. I never want to be the powerless CISO.
If you're not reporting to the CEO, like, why are you taking the job?
Well, that's what it got down to towards the end of the playing days, right? You go from player to coach. Now I'm coach. In my playing, the last few years of my playing days, I wouldn't take a vCISO gig. I wouldn't take a consulting gig unless I had FaceTime with the CEO. So, but you have to be in a certain position in order to demand that, right? I mean, I couldn't have done that 20 years ago, probably, because they'd just say, all right, screw it. We'll go somewhere else, But but if I don't get time with the CEO, I think that's another thing that's crazy about this industry. You talk to people in this industry about what do you want to be? Like, where do you see yourself?
I want to be a
What's your-
CISO.
Yeah, I want to be a CISO. It's like, why the fuck would you want to be a CISO?
That's what I got told when I was doing interview practice at college, whatever day. They're like, yeah, you need to tell them you want to, be a thing. Okay.
Right. I mean, if you want to be a CISO, open your eyes to what that is and really come up with a good purpose behind it. Like, a bad purpose to be a CISO is because you like the power, because you like some people say, well, I want to be able to influence. That's not really a purpose. Like, to what end? I mean, influence like from a power ego standpoint, or influence because you really want to help people, you want to serve people. There's a lot of CISOs that got into the CISO position just because it was the top. It's like what you've
Ladder
arrived.
climbing, right?
Right. And I think that's a tough reason too. I mean, because when things get put to the test, like after a breach, that shit doesn't really hold water anymore. Like,
You're at the top now.
yeah. And when the times are really tough and you don't want to get up in the morning and you well, I'm the CISO. Yeah. And you're burning out because you don't have a purpose. You got to, that's the recommendation anyway that I make to people that want to be CISOs. It's like, really get clear about your purpose and what kind of CISO you want to be. And your purpose might be, I want to make a shitload of money. All right. I mean, I'm not here to judge what's a noble purpose or not a noble purpose, but it better be a damn purpose, because things are going to get tough, when shit hits the fan and fingers start pointing and whatever. Because you can sit and complain as much as you want as a CISO that I'm not the one who's accountable for this. They are. Well, great. Reality is they're not going to take responsibility for it. Reality is nobody's going to hold them accountable for it. So in that sort of reality, then what position are you going to be in to deflect it, to defend yourself? because ultimately what you need to, that's the best you can do in some
So you have to
cases.
go in basically with a CYA mindset from the start.
Yeah, with a clear understanding what my role is. My role is to consult the business to make those good information security risk decisions and implement those risk decisions. That's it. My role is not to make risk decisions for this company unless it's been explicitly delegated to me. Well, then we need to charter that. I mean, that's why I'm a big fan of charters. I'm a big fan of documentation for these reasons. Because if you're going to give me that responsibility, you're going to delegate that responsibility to me, then that's how I'm going to operate. And then when I'm not empowered, like, so I make these risk decisions on behalf of the organization, which then drives my budget. And then when I go to the budget and you don't approve my budget, you just kind of restricted my ability to make risk decisions on behalf of the organization. But again, I'm reporting to you, but it's this back and forth sort of thing where, if I'm the one making risk decisions, you delegate it to me, I make the risk decisions, and then you override me, you overrule me for whatever reason. It's your business. You have the authority to do that. Then that's the defensibility. We'll document those things. Because if one of those things happens to be, involved in the breach, I know I'm going to be asked about it, or, I mean, if it's bad enough, right? If this thing goes legal and I end up, being called into a deposition, did you not know about this thing? No, I did know about that thing. Well, why didn't you do anything about it? I tried to do something about it. I made this recommendation as part of this budget and, it got declined, and that's their prerogative. They're allowed to do that. I don't take any offense to that, but because where you would find negligence in me is my inability to do my job, So I sucked at my job. Well, then, yeah, you should hold me accountable for that. So fixing the chain of responsibilities, empower the CISO. If you get the opportunity to talk to business and give them advice on how to implement accountability in a healthy way in an organization, empower the CISO. Empower them to do those two things. It's, share the accountability, transparency, all that shit. Then I go into the legal and regulatory failure. We talked about that already. Punishing victims, not the attackers. The challenge with criminal law and going after attackers is the burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, with all the tech, it's hard to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, you think is any sophisticated attacker coming at you directly?
No.
Hell no. They're proxying through.
Gotta
And
love TV when they're like, "Oh yeah, we found their IP address. It's 19." Like, okay, you're fucking dumb.
yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you're going to proxy through, and where would I proxy through? I'd proxy through servers that don't cooperate with the United States. Go through China, go through Cuba, go through North Korea, go through Iran, go through. I mean, there's lots of different places you can find servers to bounce through. And, if you have I think a good lawyer, a good legal defense, if you were an attacker, let's say they got everything, right? Except for this one server that has the logs about some activities. It's a break in the chain of evidence. A good lawyer will exploit the shit out of that and you won't get a prosecution. I haven't been called in many legal cases. Weirdly, I've been called into legal cases more on theft of intellectual property, which is just a weird fucking thing. Because the law there around intellectual
Well, are
property
you
is
protecting it like intellectual property?
exactly. If on the defense side, if they can make the case that you didn't protect this thing like it was truly intellectual property, meaning kind of like your life depends on it, well, then I'll claim it wasn't intellectual property and, get off. Those usually settle. But yeah, anyway, the cost of doing business. So if you wanted to hold like a business, I mean, there's multiple parties, right, involved in a breach. So the business is represented by people, the board of directors, the CEO. So you've got personal liability, you've got business liability. I mean, if you made it hurt enough there's definitely a relationship here. If you made it hurt enough the business, the shareholders are going to demand some change because their
So
stock price just dropped like a rock.
are 10%? of a quarter revenue or 10% of a year revenue?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. There's no like
I
thing
mean,
for that.
GDPR is supposed to be what, up to 5% or
Yeah,
something like that?
but they can't enforce that. We're shit. GDPR is such a, I mean, that's another one of those laws, like, and it was poorly written because, like, I hate, I hate the damn, just one example. I hate the cookie thing.
It's
Every,
worse now than it was before.
right. And how long have we as security people been teaching people to stop clicking on shit? Like, you have to click on shit. I get that. But at least read the shit that you're clicking before you click the shit. Right. And so, but is anybody reading the damn cookie things?
No.
No, everybody just says accept all, accept all, accept all. I
Get
mean,
off my screen.
what a waste of flipping time that is. And it reinforces like shitty behaviors on the people side. Yeah, GDPR pisses me off. But I mean, most of the legal regulations, I think, kind of piss me off.
They don't really have meat. Like even HIPAA or, GOBA, like there's no real meat. Like, oh, we're gonna give you a fine, but it's like, eh. Like give them, you know, I mean, even what Microsoft had like what 50 million? Dude, it should be 50 billion.
Oh, yeah, Microsoft employs a legal team. I don't know. It's like 250 or 300 full-time lawyers work at Microsoft. Something like that. I don't know. I don't know the exact number, and I might be way off, but I know they have a large legal
Probably
department.
private. They wouldn't publish all of it, probably.
But I know they have a huge legal department and probably, other, contract counsel, and they're a damn tech company for crying out loud. What the hell?
Yeah. Why are you having to have that type of legal defensibility if you're trying to deliver a product to the people to make their lives better?
Yeah,
Unless you're
exactly.
doing a shitty ass job.
Right. Well, and they are. I mean, if you want to call it,
A spade, a spade.
yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Like, if I use your product and it causes me harm, why do I not have any recourse? You know what I mean? Like, if you use a hair dryer and it shorts out and it shocks me and I lose a finger or something, like, there's recourse for that shit. If I'm driving my car and my brakes don't function the way they're supposed to function and I end up crashing my car, there's recourse for that shit. There's like consumer protection things. But for the software I use, yeah, fuck it.
We're not
And
consumers.
that's that, but it's my job to patch your shit. Why don't you make the shit good to begin with? And then I understand that you're going to have patches at some point, but not at this level and not this many of them. And you should patch the shit, not me patching the shit. It's your responsibility.
You
But then I'd
brought
have
up
to give you access to my shit. So it's like, fuck, we're fucked.
you brought up an interesting thing about consumer, right? So there's the consumer protection. But in this space, we don't call it consumers. We're called users.
Yeah, like drug addicts.
Mm-hmm. You think that if that is a narrative that could get shifted, if we're no longer users but we're consumers of technology, would that help close the gap on understanding of protection or enforcement?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's more accurate, because I'm not a user of cars. I'm not a user of, when I go buy food, they don't call me a food user.
Right. Where the fuck did that even come from? I want to find that person who created it.
Probably some Microsoft dude.
It annoys me too because when I try to talk to other professionals, I try to like get them to change, and they're like, "It's always been like that. They've always been users. Like it's just easy. They're users." I'm like, "You're killing me, Smalls."
You're in technology for crying out loud. Why would you ever stick with something you always do?
Yeah, right.
Unless it's a basic fundamental kind of shit. Maybe they see it that way. So fixing the legal and regulatory gap, number one, man, we got to start with some personal accountability. And this is the recommendation I made to my lawyer. And they're not friends, just the lawyer people. Why don't we have just explicit, if you don't do this one thing, you're negligent. Like, just call it out. Like, take, for instance, asset management. If your organization does not have an asset inventory, that's at least, let's say, 80% accurate, right? It's never going to be 100% because it's transient. It changes a lot, fine. But at least if you maintain an asset inventory that's 80% accurate or 90% accurate, or just put some number out there, at least it shows an effort behind it, right? You made an effort. You've got something, and you could always change it later, right? But why not say something like that? Like if you don't have an asset inventory, meaning hardware, software, and data, that's at least, covers at least 80% of your assets or 90% of your assets, then you're negligent. If you said something like that, because it's pretty cut and dry, and you're saying, and make the board negligent, members of the board or the CEO or whatever.
Well, that legal
Because
system doesn't operate on cut and dry. They like the
I know
ambiguity. That's how you are able to have the defense practice and then the prosecution practice. If it was
that's the
black
problem.
and white, it wouldn't be a thing.
Therein lies the problem, right? It's legal. I mean, I
Yep,
think if
always.
you were to bring this back, the entire accountability problem, if you wanted to point your finger at one community, that's where you point it. It's the legal community. We have shitty laws, shitty regulations, and they're enforced like shit. They're interpreted like shit. It's just shit. And so there is no accountability at the end of the day. And the only reason why the CISO suffers in this is because somebody's got to suffer. Somebody's
Yeah,
got to take the heat.
PR.
Yeah, because
And
as soon
that
as
the
because what
PR
do
is
people want when
only a
something
thing.
bad happens? What do people want when something happens? They want somebody to be held accountable
Yeah.
to it.
Bring out, someone's head on a pike. It's only PR is only a thing because of media and stocks. It's that piece wasn't tied together, it wouldn't be a thing. Like why is social media allowed to dictate a stock price? That it should be fucking criminal.
Oh yeah, I mean the lawmakers do a lot of things that are criminal,
Yeah.
But is anybody going to prosecute? I don't know. But but you can at least, I mean, from our perspective, from a security person's perspective, from a security community's perspective, at least we could all get behind a message like this, because this is another way I think you can change the industry. Is everybody makes the call that we need to have personal accountability, right? Because when you have a group of a few 100,000 strong voicing something, it's hard to silence that. I mean, the community, the general users will take note and start to listen like, yeah, hey, wait a second. What the heck? Yeah, what the fuck? We do need to do something. And then it becomes an election issue prior to the bad shit happening where people die or everything. So I think that's the point of the book. And I think that's the point of discussions like this, and the point of the podcast is get the things out there, and then figure out what things you want to rally around and what things you want to actually affect change. Because just because it's not going to happen easily doesn't mean we don't, I think, still call it out. Because we do have to, if you want accountability to actually work in our industry, you have to be personally accountable. A CEO needs to have,
Integrity.
well, right. And so if he's going back to that one example, asset inventory, if you made it that way, where we're going to hold CEOs accountable if there isn't an asset inventory, just as a hypothetical, watch how fast everybody's got a fucking asset inventory.
It'll be done by next quarter.
Hell yeah, Will. And it's totally, from a security person's perspective, from a responsible person's perspective, that's the right thing to do. They don't do it because there's nobody forcing them to. There's no pain, right? There's more benefit in not doing it than there's pain in doing it. Does that make sense?
It does, but it doesn't.
Right. I mean, shouldn't. I mean, being a Marine too, man, the importance of accountability. If nobody's going to be held accountable, then you got fucking chaos. And that's what we have in this industry.
Yeah. Well, I put out a post, I don't know, this was a couple of years ago when you guys were doing the shit show. In IT, right? we get a new person joins the company. They get onboarded, they get a laptop, keyboard, they get all this cool stuff, and we just hand it to them. And then all of a sudden in the CMDB or whatever asset you're trying to do, it says so and so, it's assigned to that person. Nowhere do we go through a process and we say, you are accountable for this device. In the military, when I issued out radios or crypto to people and we're going out, we're fighting, you know, they're signing a piece of paper that acknowledges, yep, I got this. This is the serial number. I am the owner. I am accountable. Everything that went out. Why do we not do that with the corporate world? It's
Yeah,
not that hard.
because nobody's held accountable for that. I mean, any process you put in place, like a process like that, if there's no accountability piece to it, what would be the other side then is what's the benefit to the organization in doing that? Looking at it from the language of business, which is accounting, which is money. Well, that's a process. That process will probably cost us more money than the lost assets.
Yeah, because you're allowed to depreciate assets and write them off.
Yeah. I mean,
but that's because they're not thinking about the potential data that's on them because we don't account for data.
Yeah. It reminds me of raising kids. You know what I mean? Like, I have 5 kids, and I was the accountability guy. My wife was not. I mean, she held me accountable, which I guess by proxy.
Marlis was fun mom.
Well, just like, I don't know. It's like she would give them money. None of my kids ever came and asked me for money, but they all, went to her and yeah, I don't know. But with raising kids, like if you make, they teach, well, you learn if you haven't been paying attention as a father or a mother, like if you make a threat, like if you do this, I'm going to do this kind of thing. Like here's the consequences if you do this, those types of things. If you're not willing to follow through, it's worse, if you don't follow through, because then when you say it again the next time, you didn't follow through the last time. Why the hell are you going to follow through this time? You know what I mean? Then it just becomes a total manipulation thing. And who's the one who's frustrated with all that? It's me, the parent. The kids are loving it. But I think a lot of that shit happens, with a lack of personal accountability. It's like kids, yeah, it says in the law, HIPAA, for instance, it says, which was written in 1996, 7, 6, whatever, that the security rule says you have to conduct an information security risk assessment of administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. But if nobody's enforcing that shit, nobody's doing that shit, Anyway, so personal lab, if you wanted to close the legal and regulatory gap, number 1, personal accountability. Number 2, some meaningful fines. A few $1 million isn't going to cut it for a company like, well, take Equifax. How much was Equifax's?
Like 170 million or something.
Yeah. So they exposed the personal identifiable information of 147 million. The company was fined 700 million. But that's how easy is it for Equifax to absorb that cost? It did nothing. Stock price suffered for maybe a few weeks, maybe a month, but at the end of the day, there was no accountability. Uber, they paid $148 million in settlements.
And then after they created Uber Eats, so whatever.
Well, and Uber was a straight up like cover up. I mean, that was like a fraudulent.
Yeah,
like,
they
holy
paid
shit.
And they said, no, we're good.
When they hit it, I mean, the breach happened in 2016, covered it up. They hid it from even the board. That's why, in that case, the CISO, they didn't have a CISO then, they had a chief security officer. That's why he was convicted of a criminal charge, obstruction of justice.
Because it didn't go up.
Well, because he tried to hide it, right? But anyways, but at the end of the day, to the 57 million customers and drivers that had their information exposed, I don't give a shit who did what, but somebody's got to pay for this. Somebody's got to make this not happen again. It's got to be punitive enough to deter other people from doing it. I don't think there's ever been a a dollar amount in any one of the breaches that's actually been deterrent enough. Like, oh, shit, yeah, we better
Yeah,
actually
no,
do something now.
not even close. What do you think about the ongoing situation in the news, the Oracle news?
God,
That seems to be all over the place right now, huh?
I know. And there's been quite a few people messaging me on what I think about it. I'm like, I don't know, man.
I'm not on the inside. What do you want me to tell you?
Not on the inside of that one. No, thank God, I don't. It gets to a point where it's like you don't want to be in the. I mean, it was cool in the earlier days being on the inside because it felt like cool to know things that other people didn't know. You're like, oh yeah,
I know.
it served my ego more than anything else, I think. But now at this age, it's like I don't want to fucking know. I don't want to answer the phone. I don't want to answer the email. I don't want to answer the messages. It's the benefit that I got to my ego wasn't worth the cost to my mental health. In terms of
Probably fair.
stress, yeah, in terms
Yeah.
of stress, in terms of number of hours, lack of rest, just the frustration. Had I knowing what I know now, I would have not probably taken a lot of those cases. But I guess now you can kind of share some of the wisdom you got from it.
From the experience, right? And then people want to know the facts, right? If you're able to, you're not under NDA anymore or whatever, share the real story. I think we need more of that, more of the sharing the real story and less handcuffing, because other people aren't going to learn unless we're talking about it.
Well, but who's listening
Mm,
too? You know what I mean? When you've got a reach like a Microsoft or, a FireEye or, when you've got that kind of
Mandiant.
reach and that, yeah, CrowdStrike, when you've got that kind of reach, all you can do is preach the truth as much as you can, be open to, I think, challenge, and, at least I sleep well at night knowing I said what I was supposed to say, as opposed to, I mean, it's the same way I would have done it as, when I was, say, there's no defense in ignorance. There used to be. There used to be, you used to run into CEOs and things that would say, don't tell me about it because if I know about it, then I got to fix it.
Right.
And that was somewhat legally defensible, I think. But somewhere along the line, ignorance no longer became defensible when it's something that you should know. You know what I mean?
Right. Every company is now basically a tech company because they have so much. And you might not be making tech, but you are foundationally run by tech. So you need to understand it to a good degree.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the illusion, I think continues. I mean, I think if the general public knew how, I think, fucked up this is, I think they would demand
I don't
better.
know. I go over this a lot in my head. I mean, I I think they wouldn't care
I don't know. I mean, really, you think so? Why? Why do you think they wouldn't care?
because it's complex and then they don't feel it. Well, they don't know how they feel it. And back to our good friend Mr. Ryan, it's analog and digital. You don't feel digital. There's no physical anything.
Yeah, see, but I disagree with that. I mean, I disagree with you don't feel the digital because you do. It's because it manifests itself as the physical. I mean, it's digital and physical. You know, like I spend too much time watching. So my eyes hurt and I get a headache. So I have to stop. Or I watch pornography online and start to experience sexual dysfunction with my mate, or whatever it is. It manifests
Do you
itself.
think people are aware enough to tie it to it being technology that's doing it? Or maybe that's what we're talking about is if they were aware. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to figure out the message, but I think if they did know, like, who the fact of the matter is, your person, you have no control over your digital life.
Zero.
And so I think if
You
you
got to use
were,
a VPN. That's how you get secure, by the way. That's
Right.
what TV
Yeah.
commercials tell me.
But I think
NordVPN.
if you were blunt and honest with people and explain to them the consequences of that, you know what I mean? Because you do feel you may not feel the pain. That's because you're being bled out for a long period of time. You know what I mean? It's not like you cut my jugular, but I got this wound that just keeps oozing blood and eventually I will die from it. Maybe that would change things. The other alternative is you continue to allow things to go the way they're going and you can sort of predict where it's going to end.
Feel like it's gonna be like the automotive industry, right? We didn't have seatbelts for how long? And eventually people died because we started going fast enough.
Yeah, good point.
And then they're held accountable. Right now, I mean, in the grand scheme of thing, we are still young. I mean, really not anymore, but we are still young. So we're waiting, like you guys always say, like we're waiting for that event and then
Right.
it will change. But
Yeah. Yeah.
why as humans do we have to wait for that event if we know it's coming? That's the frustrating part.
It is very frustrating. Yeah. Because you try to figure out the right message to get the point across, so that you can save people from harm. I mean, it's, because every excuse you hear, every time you hear an excuse, it just reinforces the lack of accountability, right? Because if there's accountability, there are no excuses, right? When these things are defined, because I've heard that a lot. Well, we're a young industry. It takes time. Young is no excuse for irresponsible. And when I had my children, when they acted irresponsibly, even at the age of month, you still corrected the behavior. You know what I mean? You still held them accountable so that when they got older, that, I wasn't going to have, like a serial murderer on my hands. So, at what point do we start to implement the accountability and start to correct? Because the young thing, that excuse doesn't work.
Well, it's gonna work as long as they let it, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
suppose too. Well, and the good thing is, I mean,
We're
like,
basically like adolescent teenagers right now, is what I feel as
like,
an industry.
we're like adolescent teenagers that are addicted to like lots of drugs
Well, because I
and
mean,
driving our cars and, no job.
I don't go to the big conferences like the DEF CONs and the RSAs and stuff, but I hear about what goes on there, and that's basically a teenage fucking raver.
Can be. I mean, there's like
Maybe,
big
maybe
gatherings,
that's what
there's
we need. Maybe we need a
kill,
public
kill some of us off.
a public broadcast of what happens at RSA. Like I heard one year that they were having people like fish for dollars or some shit.
I
Like
was there.
if
They had
people
They
knew,
had $1 on a fishing pole with a fish line, and people would walk
so
by and try
like
to grab it, and he'd like switch it up. There was also
here we,
$1, like one of those wind tunnel things that blows around with dollar
yeah,
bills in it.
it's try and catch it all.
Yeah.
Here we are at RSA, where the industry professionals that protect your data are working hard at their job, working to protect you, the normal people out there. This is what they're doing. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Do some exposés kind of thing. But then, you got to be careful with that because
You'll get some,
you'll get blacklisted yourself,
yeah, you'll probably get some heat for this. I'm not going to have a career.
Right. But
I'll put
it's,
myself out there. Fuck it.
I think what's always been kind of, it's funny because I was talking to, the CEO of FR Secure, John Harmon, today. And, we were laughing, sort of crying, sort of about how's business? It's busy as shit. I mean, we have lots and lots and lots of business. And it's like, it kind of sucks, honestly, because like, you wish you had a little bit less business because you had more people who were doing their shit right. We do as much education as I can think of to do, like the CISP mentor program, the CVCISO program. Podcasts aren't really necessarily for teaching as much as just my own mental health. Like when I get to talk to you, I just get to get the shit off my chest. But yeah, I mean, I guess you can just keep preaching it. And then when shit does happen, maybe they'll remember. Even if they didn't remember, I guess at that point we switch from protect yourself, stop fucking up, to, okay, you fucked up. Now let's help you out,
Let's move on from here.
because our incident response business is going through the roof too. And it's like both sides, man.
Crazy.
So examples: Equifax breach, 147 million Americans. The executives cashed out. I don't know if you remember that, but the executives, there were more, at least two executives that sold significant numbers of shares of stock a week before the breach was announced.
Wasn't the before? Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah. So they denied insider trading. I don't think there was a criminal prosecution that came out of that, but still, you have to admit, like, the timing is pretty suspicious. Yeah. The CEO, Richard Smith, walked away with an $18 million pension. No personal financial penalties were assessed on him. He didn't have any. He did have to make a couple of trips, I think, to Capitol Hill for some Senate hearings, but how hard can that be? That's more entertainment than anything else.
Take your private jet, get some lunches, stay at a hotel. Yeah, whatever.
Yep. The CISO and CIO were both forced out. I mentioned the CISO, that was Susan Malden, who, she had a banking background, a pretty strong one. She was from what I could tell and what I know about her, she was a pretty damn good CISO, but she took a whole bunch of shit for that breach, including, personal attacks about her past, about, hobbies, about her degree in music. The CIO was David Webb. They were both fired, but that's common, right?
It's almost the expectation.
Yep.
At this point.
Now, the ones who are ultimately responsible for information security in an organization, the board of directors, there was no board changes whatsoever.
Golden parachute.
Well, no parachute at all. They didn't even have to jump out of the damn plane. They're still on it.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, there was no consequences. They remained insulated from all the fallout. The Uber cover-up, that was 2016. They were hacked. Personal data, 57 million customers and drivers. Uber paid the hackers $100,000 under the guise of a bug bounty. I don't know if you remember that. That's what got Joe Sullivan in trouble as the CISO. He tried to, all right, don't announce this to anybody, and we'll just call this a bug bounty. We'll pay you $100,000 for this bug bounty. Well, that actually kind of stayed quiet for about a year, almost a year. And then, yeah, it leaked. The CEO, Travis Kalanick, I don't know. He sort of left in the middle of this. So between 2016 and 2017, between the time the breach happened and the time that it was publicly.
He just slid out the back door.
Sort of. Yeah. No criminal charges. He is a multi-billionaire, but he resigned. No related scandals, nothing. Actually, no, there were some scandals that came up later with him around accounting. I'd have to Google some more of that. But so, I always felt like as a CEO, you should feel the weight of the organization you lead, right? I have to have the utmost integrity, because a lack of integrity on my part, other than my language, right? But that reflects on the people that work.
It filters down. Everybody sees it.
Right. And so I don't know how somebody could lack ethics at the CEO level, at an executive level, and be able to sleep at night. I mean, I don't know how you can't feel that shit. I don't understand that at all. And yeah, so Travis is a guy I'd probably like to get my hands on, just because it really pisses me off that, you do that to people. But anyway, the CISO, again, they didn't have a CISO. They called it a chief security officer. That was Joe Sullivan. He was convicted of obstruction of justice because he tried to play this little game with the bug bounty thing. So that was, part of a cover up. And I don't know where he's at today. I don't know if Joe Sullivan, because he was on the circuit. I mean, he was on the speaking circuit. People knew about him, all that good stuff. Uber paid $148 million. What do you think that did to the company? Was that punitive enough to deter other people? Matt?
Joel Sullivan now has his own security LLC company.
All right. That's cool. Speaking, there was another a guy that I worked.
Oh, and
Really,
he's also the chief security officer. Well, he was for Cloudflare, I guess, for a while.
is that after?
But yeah, now
He went.
after
It was
he
after.
went to Cloudflare, and now he's got his own security company that helps create best practices. Okay, that sounds like a guy I want helping me with that.
Do you remember the name Mark Lanterman?
I do not.
He was well, he still is. I mean, he's very good forensic analyst and runs his own company. Been in like, I don't know, hundreds of legal cases. But, so our paths had crossed numerous times. I stumbled across a news article last week that they're calling into question his credentials. There's allegedly, Hennepin County in Minnesota is alleging that he falsified some of his credentials.
What do you mean, like his P or like a certificate or some shit? Or like job history?
Both, maybe. And it's all allegations, and the FBI is investigating now. So I sort of liked Mark, but he was kind of kind of an ego guy. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because if they find out that he truly had falsified his either academic credentials, experience, whatever, that calls into question multiple cases, if not all cases, that he was an expert witness and provided testimony or professional services.
Yikes.
That would suck.
Is that a long list? Like he's been around a while? Like that's an exhaustive list?
According to him, he's been in thousands of cases. But if you just do the math, it's like, you can't do that many.
You're not doing that.
You can't do that many in a lifetime, man. How do you do thousands of cases?
Right. You're just at the courtroom all day, every day.
Right. Yeah. So maybe hundreds, maybe 100 or so. More
Easy
than definitely.
We call that padding a zero.
Yeah. But Mark Lanterman, you should look him up.
Mark, how do you spell that? Lanterman?
Lanterman. Yeah, Lanterman. All right. Then the last breach I wanted that's in the book that's coming. Like I said, this is the draft of chapter 2, Change Healthcare Ransomware Attack, 2024. It's interesting that Change Healthcare was acquired by.
Is this he's the young dude?
What?
There's a Mark Lanterman that's
do this shit after the show.
Sorry.
Hey, man, you're like,
I'm worse than you, I think.
Oh, no, we're cut
United
from the same
Health
cloth,
Group.
man.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, this one, Change Healthcare, was acquired by United Health Group. And the method of attack in this breach was like, you could have done it. I could have done it. I mean, this was a trivial attack. It was super non-sophisticated. Of course, they made the case that it was sophisticated. That's the PR play always. And so they paid the ransom, right, to get things unlocked and whatever. And then they got ransomed again by another group. So basically got hit twice. So if you're not negligent enough on the first one, how about the second one? And so they paid the ransom so they could get the shit back running again. But there was still disclosure of the information because they had exfiltrated the data. I mean, this was a complete shit show. And the thing that really sucks about it is during the actual, what Change Healthcare does is they process, I think, healthcare payments.
Yeah, for like a bunch of places.
Yeah. So they had a whole bunch of pharmacies, clinics, hospitals
that couldn't give out.
They couldn't process payments. So they were all fucked. And then the patients, it was their medical information. I mean, it was like the most sensitive information there is about you online was leaked in that breach. And they originally got the numbers wrong, and then they got it wrong again. Turns out, I don't know what the final number is, but I think it's like 100 some odd million, 120 million people.
So it's the size of Equifax, basically.
Yeah, but this is,
It's
but like
different data.
yeah, like my financial, when you get my financial data, you get my social security number and, whatever. You know, I'm not going to die from that. I mean, it's a pain in the ass, to recover, but you can do it. When you take away my medical information, because the way you handle that, when your social security number gets breached, you have to get a new social security number, right? Once data is leaked, it's leaked. You don't get it back. The only thing you can do is change it so that the data that the attacker has is no longer valuable, right? And so I can do that with my social security number. I can't do that with my health data, right? The fact that I had cancer in 2000, what year was that? 19, 20? I don't remember what year. But the fact that that's happened, right? I can't change that. It goes into part of my diagnosis, right? When I go to the doctor the next time, or like things that I might be allergic to, right? I might be allergic to certain drugs, certain, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the shitty thing about medical information that gets lost or stolen. And another thing about how do I change? I mean, I can't change it, but there's also no central sort of repository like there is with, like the 3 credit bureaus. It's all over the fucking place. So this one really pisses me off because this is an organization that definitely has the resources to do shit right.
Yeah, for sure.
And if
They
anything,
had
in
the
this political
money.
climate with what people, all that shit going on, holy crap. Yeah, it pisses me off. But anyway, Andrew Whitty, that's the CEO. He's still there. I don't think there's anything. He got called on Capitol, called to Capitol Hill a couple times. Ain't nothing going to happen to him. He's bulletproof, untouchable. So he retains his position, testified for Congress. There's not going to be any personal accountability on his part. I always thought, like, as a CEO is responsible for every single thing that happens within the organization, right? So the fact that, no accountability pisses me off. The CISO was Steve Martin. He wasn't fired, but he was repositioned. He was kind of silenced and moved into another
Sit
place.
over there.
Yeah, so he's got this token role of Chief Restoration Officer is what he is now.
Sounds cool.
Chief Restoration Officer, yeah, so no longer CISO. And then they hired a new guy that's come in as the CISO. Board members, untouchable. Nothing will happen to them. Who paid the price? Who pays the price? The patients. I do. You do.
It
And
sounds
you
like
may not feel the pain, but imagine being misdiagnosed when you go into the hospital, or a doctor making, on how to treat your disease
right.
based on somebody else's medical information. That's life or death kind of shit,
It's hard to think about. That's how
Yeah,
bad it is.
when I brought this up once in a talk, we had talked about, the types of information that I'm the most, I guess, unhappy about, losing or whatever. And I mentioned this, and somebody came up to me after the talk, and it was a lady who went to the doctor only a couple of months before I gave the talk. And the doctor, when she came in, the doctor asked her, "How's the baby? Like, how's your daughter?" And she's like, "What? Like, how's your daughter?" She's like, "I don't have a daughter." Shit. It shows here that you were in the hospital for, giving birth, that she had a baby. Expect more of that. If you don't have accountability, certainly on the medical side of things, expect more, because that's also one of the most valuable pieces of information on the dark web, because health insurance is so damn expensive. I can't afford it. So I can just go to a middleman and get your health information and go get treatment under your insurance. And then you'll have the medical bills for my treatment.
Thank you very much.
Which you can dispute that and probably have something, you can get that taken care of.
A year.
But I can't get taken care of the fact that now your medical shit's on my shit.
When I was going through my outpatient program, I was in therapy one time. They asked me like, "So how is your transition going?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, aren't you transitioning?" I'm like, "No, where the fuck did this come from?"
God.
Like, yeah, we need to correct that right now, please. That was
Yeah.
weird as fuck. So I have a question for you. Rich here in the chat, we've been chatting. He talks about, we were talking about phishing,
I don't like fishing.
and accountability. Who do you hold accountable for employees and stuff clicking on links? We need to keep someone accountable, right?
Yeah. I don't know. It's in the book.
I
No,
said, I think it's about risk management, right? Like, we should be able to allow them to do their job and click on stuff. That's what the response plan is for.
well, if you issue the directive not to do, you have to be really clear. It's the same thing like when you're raising kids, right? If I'm going to hold one of my kids accountable to something, I have to be clear on what it is I'm holding them accountable for, right? So it's not as simple as just, falling for a phishing attack, right? And then what will accountability, bring you, I guess? It's, because you can make a case either way, right? You can make a case that the user did something that they weren't supposed to do. They were instructed not to do. They were trained not to do. They were trained to be situationally
We're
aware.
not users, we're consumers.
Well, consumers, yeah, whatever. The endpoint for people, so, you could play the card. You could play the card of, well, I'm going to hold them accountable and then fire them. But what's that going to do to your culture? It's not as simple as just sanctioning them, because you also have on the other side, like, what about, we're the ones who got the email to their inbox. We're the
Yeah,
ones
we're
that provided
allowing
the
it.
computer to them. We're the ones that gave them an unsafe system, really, So it could go multiple ways, but that would be a risk management play as well, because like we're just going to assume that people are going to fall for the phishing emails, right? So you look for mitigating controls to put in place. So depending on the situation, if you were or I were the CISO in a situation like that, consulting the business to make those good information security risk decisions, that would probably be on the list. Multi-factor authentication on anything that's externally exposed to mitigate those types of attacks.
I need to add phishing to my risk register.
You need to add what?
Phishing to the risk
Phishing?
register. Yeah.
I don't
Don't
like
really
phishing.
don't really have it on there. Have like other stuff, but that's a straight thing to have, I think.
But the point is with phishing, like, define the accountability, right? You get to define who's going to be held accountable for that, but then enforce it.
If you're not enforcing it, who cares? Yep, I
Yeah.
agree.
And that'd be one where I think it'd be a great conversation with a CEO, because the CEO is the one who usually drives the culture of the organization too. So depending on, the type of CEO and what kind of culture they want to run in the organization, they may make the call. I've not seen it before firsthand, but they may make the call that fire them.
I've heard people preaching for that, the tech people. Fire them. I don't know. I don't think that's the right decision.
No, show me somebody who's not human, who doesn't make mistakes. You know what I mean?
Right.
You got to do some, yeah, I don't know. In my business, in the cultures, where I've been the CEO, that's not the culture that makes us most effective as an organization. At the end of the day, a business is in business to make money, right? So if that's the way you want to run the culture, how does that equate to you making more money? Probably not going to equate very well.
Well,
Firing people.
hiring people and finding people is money. You're already invested in that person.
Yeah. Yeah. They've done studies on that too. Like, I don't know how many months of salary is the cost to replace somebody. So there's numbers on that where you can do a cost analysis on how much it costs the business to, the turnover. So I think the accountability things don't change, because why would they? Right? The consequences then. So your shitty choices. So going back to what my father taught me, shitty choices have consequences, right? So
Except in information security.
no, there's still consequences. It's just the people that are supposed to be accountable don't suffer from the consequences. I do. You do. We do. The financial burden falls under the consumer and the businesses. And it doesn't hurt much, but, Wells Fargo isn't in business to lose money, right? So, if they had a breach and they got fined $700 million, they're just going to recover that cost by raising fees. And it won't hurt much. It's like that, like I said, it's like that slow bleed. So instead of me having, that free thing I used to have, now I have to pay $5 for it. And then next year I have to pay $10 for it. That's
then
the way
it's so custom, and then
right.
$100. Then they
I
go
mean,
big.
look at airlines. I mean,
Oh my God, that's their.
if you backed up, 20, 30 years, airlines, and look at them there before to what they are now. I mean, we used to get full meals on a flight from Minneapolis to even Kansas City. You'd get a meal. Now I get like
Cookie.
not even, it's like a wafer thing. And then they don't even give me a full soda. They give me like
Baby cup.
a baby. Yeah. And then I have to pay for my luggage. And it's like, holy shit.
You got to pay for what seat you want after you already paid for your. It's like, oh my.
But that's how it works, right? You don't take somebody from there to here overnight. You just do these little baby steps. But then eventually it comes a point where you stop and you look back and like, what the hell
did we
happened?
get here?
Yeah. And that's what's happening. That's what's
it's
happening
funny.
with us.
So like, you used to be able to like just walk right into the airport, right? Get on the plane. Then we had the whole thing, and then it was like, a nightmare to get through. But now you pay a couple bucks and you walk straight through pretty much with, pre-check and shit.
We should do the next episode on the number of civil liberties we gave up
removed
after 9/11.
That would actually be pretty fun.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that on the next episode because people don't realize it. Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
You don't have nearly the rights you used to have anymore. Kind of crazy.
Or the ones that we do have, we forget. Like when TSA tells you need to do the biometrics, you don't because it's not mandated. But they just use their power to make you scared.
Totally. Yeah, we'll do the civil liberties one next week.
That'll be cool because it's not like a, a security related thing. It'll be an off-topic fun thing.
Yeah, which is what this, I mean, it's InfoSec to insanity, so I'll share some of the insanity shit too.
Yes. We are going insane, I think.
Yeah. Awesome privacy. Okay, so all that other stuff. So anyway, the call to action in the book, I mean, there's a number of things that we need to do. If we actually, it can't be one person. It can't even be a small group of people. It's if we want to do something about this, it's almost like as a CISO, you consult the business to make good information security risk decisions, and then you implement those things. It's like here, you consult the reader, to make good information security risk decisions. So here's the consultation, here's the recommendations. If you don't want to do it, then fine. Keep playing the victim. Be the victim. I'm stuck with it as well, but at least, you try to make my own mitigating controls around it. Because it starts with awareness. I mean, all of information security starts with situational awareness, understanding the situation that you're in, understanding the vulnerabilities that you have, understanding the threats that apply to those vulnerabilities, and then act accordingly. It's not rocket science, unless you're actually building rockets as part of your business. Then it's rocket science. Anyway, I appreciate it, man. It gave me a good opportunity to get this off my chest because accountability, being a guy who was an only child growing up in a Marine Corps family, holy shit, accountability is like the shit.
The fact that it's not a thing it's hard for us, me and you, to even comprehend that it's not a thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, what? My brain just skips.
It's true. So it is good for us to talk about it from a mental health perspective because
for sure.
Like what was the SolarWinds breach?
We talked about that one a lot.
Yeah, the CISO in that, was named in an SEC action. And essentially when they do that, it kind of fucks your career for any executive role ever again in any public company. Because they're not going to take that risk, right? you're a target. It opens up doors to all kinds of liability things if something goes bad. And being that you're a security guy, it's just a matter of time for things are going to go bad anyway.
Right.
So, he's kind of screwed. And it's really sad to see that the government is pushing that accountability button as opposed to the one where they really should be pushing, which is the board, and they're focusing on things, if you can go and read the actions that they're taking, because
the board people are the ones that are also part of the lobby groups and make, it's all fucking tied together.
Yeah, but it sucks to see, somebody essentially lose their career. And I don't know all the inside shit. I mean, I don't know all the details. You always have to have both sides of the story and everything. Just based on what I understand that he's been he's kind of the scapegoat here. And so it sucks to see somebody's career get ruined because of the lack of accountability for the people that are supposed to have it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like
Anyway, life's not fair.
Making your kid accountable for your decisions.
Yeah. I used to tell my kids when they used to tell me things like, Dad, that's not fair. I tell them the fair is in August.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't give a shit about the fair. That's in August. What the hell are you talking about the fair now?
I like that one. That's good.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, good talk. Let's do, what are we going to do? Shit.
So liberty's lost.
So, okay. I should take a note on that.
I'll message you.
I'd actually done some research on this because I was kind of curious a while back. I think I was on a flight somewhere. And so I was like, just kind of scrolled down the whole of this so I can regurgitate that stuff. You do the same. You come with your research, I'll come with mine, and we'll come with a list of civil liberties that we've given up. We'll reminisce a little bit about what life was like pre-9.
There's going to be a lot more coming from you from that perspective. I mean,
I'm old.
I'm just saying that you probably have more experience.
Yeah. It's because I'm old and you're in the middle of transitioning. I get it.
Yes, exactly.
All right, man.
All right.
We'll talk to you next week, brother. Appreciate you too.
Bye.
All right.